favorite, but just to give a different answer, I like the Africa stories a lot. Those are awesome. The dreaminess of it. That's sort of like, it was sort of a precursor to the Hellboy in Hell even. It was like, there's a certain dreaminess and a certain like, here's a story I'm going to tell you sort of a feeling that it's like, and it feels like, yeah, it's like you were saying, it's like Hellboy has been this process of stripping things away this whole time, and now you're just down to the pure Mignola thing, which is...
Yeah, and Africa really was a big start of that.
Yeah.
Because that was when he started talking lions. That's what the book was always supposed to be. Anybody have the next question?
You can take your work with you, or do you guys have a set office in your house or at work?
Oh, you mean individually?
Yeah, individually. I mean, what is your process to go through to get into Hellboy mode, to get not dad mode or whatever mode you're in, to actually flip in and go into that?
I work all the time, so there is no
other mode for you.
There's not another. Yeah.
He works like 18 hours a day.
Yeah, I've got a studio at the kind of in the basement. It's not really a basement, the bottom part of the house. And I work on one side. My wife colors also. She's Michelle Madsen. She colors Buffy and stuff. So she has the other side of the studio. And yeah, I work on a Cintiq screen. So everything I do is sort of painted into the page. Yeah, I just kind of listen to podcasts and music.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, like switching modes, because I work on a lot of different kind of books, and I'll always kind of try, when we're doing the Mignola stuff, got to really make it feel as much like Mike as you can. So I go back and reread stuff. That helps. But yeah, mostly it's just this like panic to move from one project to the next all the time. So I don't have a process.
Yeah, no, I don't have a process for switching either. It always feels like when you're starting a new project that you're already late. Like the first day you get to work on it always feels like, man, I'm already like 3 days later than I would like to be. So it's like changing from one to the other is always just a panic.
But like physically, the way you work has changed so much. Like from Petrograd to when you started doing BPRD, you were drawn more like regular comics kind of. And now, like his latest process, nobody's seen much of anything of Witchfinder.
Yeah, there's like the 4 or 5 preview pages.
Right, but I can't wait for people to see that stuff in black and white, because it's the first time that you've done washes for us. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I did.
I'll ask.
So I for most of my BPRD stuff, well, for all my BPRD stuff, I just did straight brush and ink, a little bit of pen and stuff in there. And then I did this book, Bad Blood, and that's fully painted. It's all like watercolor washes and everything. And so when I was about halfway through with that, I was like, when I get back on Witchfinder, I should be doing some washy stuff at least. But it's got to be colored by Dave, because it's not going to look like Mignolaverse without it. So I talked to Dave about it, and we worked out this technique where I'm doing just gray washes on all the pages. But the way he's coloring it is just I've never seen anything colored quite like this. I think it's really nice.
And you've worked over other guys' washes, plenty, right?
Yeah, and I think the difference with this stuff is I figured out a sort of a technical way to color Tyler's washes. So instead of having a gray layer over it, there's a color.
Canon?
Yeah, right. Somebody was asking me the other day. We just announced that we're going to do a big collection of all the Weird Tales stuff that we did around the time that Mike was doing the Hellboy movie, and we had other people just doing random, non-canonical, crazy stories. And somebody said, well, why don't you do that again? Wouldn't it be fun to do it again? It's like, that's itty-bitty. Like, itty-bitty is people taking these designs and going just completely somewhere else. Have you guys seen Itty Bitty Hellboy? Itty Bitty Hellboy is awesome. It's Art and Franco, the guys who did Tiny Titans and Superman Family, and it was all her idea. It was all in this idea because she read. Why are people booing?
No booing.
She read that Art and Franco got kicked off. Well, they canceled Superman Family, and she's like, "You should have them do Hellboy." And I was like, "Oh my god!" And then she asked them, and they said yes.
Is that how it works? Are you like a buzzard seeing who's not working? And like,
Yes.
I was just really mad. I was really mad because Tiny Titans got canceled and Superman Family got canceled. So I figured.
because it looks great. It's a super fun comic.
Absolutely.
So what other horror influence? I mean, Lovecraft obviously, but what other kind of horror stuff that you guys want to either touch on or go to?
All of it, like, all the classic stuff is like really important to kind of, to all of us. I mean, to Mike, it's funny, John, Mike's favorite book is Dracula. Dracula is like the most important thing in Mike's whole, like cosmos. And he came, and when he and I did a story called the Pickens County Horror with Jason Latour, and when Mike came up with the idea for that story, he told it to John Arcudi, and John said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do vampires." Mike was just like, "Oh, wow, well, you're kind of my co-writer, and now I guess we're not going to do vampires." And that just seemed like a huge part of like the horror world just shut off from BPRD and from other stuff, and that was what led me and Mike to like, no, let's do more horror stuff. Let's do vampires. Let's do all of it. So there's more vampire stories to be told in the Hellboy universe. There's a reason why there's been as few as there have been, but that's going to start to change now that the world's, ending. But yeah, like where you can get into other cultures' mythology and like get inspired by it, but have ways where you don't have to, really deal with somebody else's religion is like the sweet spot for this stuff. What about you?
The horror stuff that I've really liked in comics, like Wrightson, and I've been really into, I'm going to say his name wrong, Junji Ito?
That's close enough, yeah.
Yeah, Dark Horse does a series called Motel of Horror? Museum of Horror.
Yeah.
Museum of Horror.
But his masterpiece is
The Spiral.
Uzumaki. Yeah.
Oh.
Spiral.
Oh yeah.
Are you familiar with him at all?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Like he has a story, for those who don't know, he has a story about this guy who goes to a town and everyone's obsessed with spirals. And so they're doing things like carving spirals in themselves, and it sounds like that's a silly premise for a whole horror thing, but it's terrifying.
It's like if H.P. Lovecraft was obsessed with spirals instead of fish.
Yeah.
But it's like spirals drive people insane, and spirals mess with people.
That's the one where the guy takes off his hat, right? At one point.
I think so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something's been done to his head, right?
Yeah.
There's another sequence where a guy gets run over by a car, and they're like, oh no, and they go to try to get him out from under it, but his body has been yanked up into the wheel well and is wrapped around the axle, and so now he's a spiral, and it's drawn really beautifully.
Yeah. And then he has the one, I actually haven't read it, I've only seen pictures of it, of the fish all grow legs and come onto land and start attacking people, so it'll be like a shark with crab legs, like coming through somebody's house trying to get him, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So recently, Valiant Comics brought all their properties together to make a shared universe. Do you see that ever happening for Hellboy and the other Dark Horse properties?
No, Hellboy's already its own. He asked about Valiant, their shared universe. But with Valiant, what they've done is cool because they launched it with the intention for it to be, a shared universe. The Hellboy thing, most of what Mike does already is a shared universe. Baltimore's not, and the novel that he did, Joe Golem, those are different. But everything else we're doing, it's all a shared universe, and it was that way from the beginning. So to now introduce, Buffy and Star Wars wouldn't work. Wouldn't make a lot of sense. We do it in Star Wars. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to people who want to get into comics as writers?
The main thing I say to people trying to get in as writers is, or to do anything, do it obsessively, work really hard, generate lots of material. As a writer, if you can't draw at all, meet people through the internet, meet people at shows, and do short things. Don't come up with your idea for your Cerebus and then go find somebody at a show and say, here's a script for the first 100 pages. Don't do that at all, because like a lot of people think, oh well, I've written some stories and I've written some poems and I wrote this one screenplay, so now I'm gonna write comics. Comics, just like screenplays, just like playing the guitar, it's a art form all to itself. You learn so much from doing it, so you gotta do it. And I like the idea of doing short things, 8, 10, 20 pages, so you can do it and you can throw it away because you're gonna want to. You know, every 100 pages or so, you're gonna realize that you're way better than you were 100 pages ago, and you're not gonna want to look back. And I know people that have like embarked on that big masterpiece thing, and by the time they get a few issues in, they're looking back with nothing but disdain at the thing they did before. So do short pieces, team up with whoever is willing to team up with you, and artists are as much in need of partners to get their work out there as writers are. So, you know, look up people, do an 8-page story. If you hit it off with that artist, and if you feel like you're generating good work together, then try to do more. And if you're not, then just move on and go find somebody else. Another terrible thing is launching into that 300-issue magnum opus with somebody who 2 weeks later you realize you hate, or like a year later you realize you hate them. And that happens all the time too. Walking Dead. So, you know, like doing short things until you can really find your feet and find the right people to work with is important. Sure. Anybody else?
You said Mike's foundation was Dracula. What are your guys' foundations?
Well, I think like foundation for coloring always sort of depends on the work that you're coloring. So you know, my influences come from Mike. So he likes certain art and certain paintings and posters. So all that stuff is sort of incorporated into what I do in Hellboy. You know, working on Mike's stuff is a lot different than coloring Tyler's stuff. But trying to pull those influences across, you know, like sort of an antique feel or something like that. But kind of getting into Mike's head for the feel of the universe. And you know, he realizes that not everybody can be colored the same, but so you have to pull from different places. But my influence comes from Mike.
Yeah, on this stuff, like Dave and I have spent like, well, 20 years for me and like 17. Yeah.
Well, I was separated.
In like 96.
I started working at Dark Horse.
Okay. Well, so we've been doing this with Mike for a long time, and especially working on his stuff. Yeah, like we try to get in his head. And the way I've seen my job for a long time is like I get to work with some really intense people, and I learn a lot from working with them, and then I try to kind of, you know, like whether it's Mike or like Joss Whedon, they don't have the time or the inclination to worry about like every step in the process of making some of the books. So I got to try to do what I think they would do if they had the time and inclination and whatnot to do that. So it's like, fundamentally, yeah, we're trying to do Mike's book the way he wants it done, and even I think you guys, when you're drawing the books, we never want anybody to hate Mike's style, but there's certain things about how Mike works.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to draw for that universe when you're doing a Mignola book.
Yeah, like is storytelling, like is your storytelling different when you're doing this? Like do you feel a little bit more free when you're doing Bad Blood?
Yeah, I think so. Like, there's definitely a stronger sense of like when I get the script for BPRD or Witchbinder, it's like you guys have been through it very, very thoroughly. And I think Bad Blood was a little bit more, here's the script, we're ready to go, sort of a thing.
And Jonathan didn't have as much of a writer on that, didn't have as much of a background in comics, he's a prose writer.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the cool things about the whole Mignola deal, I think, is that like we all get to kind of bring our different voices to it, but we pick the people whose voices are going to fit. You know, like Arcudi has written more books in this world than Mike has, right? I mean, he must have by now. But we picked Arcudi and we stick with Arcudi because what he does, like, adds a layer and fits really comfortably in with what Mike does. Like, the sense of humor is different, but really similar. The approach to character is like in a lot of ways more personal than Mike's is, but still really similar. So there's just all these things that we know we can get with John, and that we get out of all these different artists. Like we've done a couple jobs in the past where we did hire somebody for their ability to ape Mike, and it wasn't always satisfying, so then we said we're just not going to do that anymore. And these days, when we do hire somebody who looks a lot like Mike, like you might think Duncan or Gabriel Ba, their stuff looks like Mike's, but they kind of arrive there honestly, rather than like the guys. And I know these guys who sit there with Mike's books open in front of them while they're drawing. And they're like, how does he do a knuckle? Let me draw a knuckle. How does he do a kneecap? And there's guys that try to clone Mike to the best of their ability, but we learned a while ago that wasn't for us. I don't know if that answered that question at all. All right. I hope Elizabeth's okay with the Q&A being over, but eat a bunch of food, and I guess we're signing stuff. And we have chocolate.